Have you ever wondered who the gay leadership dude is? You might also be wondering what this has to do with DEI. DEI has many facets, and today we will unwrap this topic that is not often discussed. We are excited to have you here with us today. I am looking forward to you all meeting my guest. We value your feedback and your opinions. Please drop them in the chat or comment boxes on social media. We intend to respond to as many comments and questions as possible. This takes a great deal of effort for us to pull off, so I'm eternally grateful to all of my loyal followers. Follow Diversity Connects Us on Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcasts. My name is Rochelle Carrier, and I'm a personal DEI consultant and EQ coach and authoress of Emotional Intelligence, a toolkit for managing diversity, equity, and inclusion. The link to purchase my books will be in the comments. For a living, I help thought-provoking leaders reframe their cultural mindsets through thought-provoking workshops and webinars. Join us as we share the different voices in the DEI space. Today, I'd like to welcome Dr. Steve Iacovelli. Hello, and how are you?
Hello, bonsoir. Nice to see you. Bonjour, I
Nice
should
to
say.
see you too.
Yes.
If you could tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, we'd love to hear about you.
Yeah, so as Rochelle said at the beginning, my name is Dr. Steve Iacovelli, pronouns he, him, and his, and I am the owner and principal of Top Dog Learning Group, as you can see here, also known as the Gay Leadership Dude, as she shared. And just by that title alone, you automatically know three things about me. You know that I'm gay, that I self-identify as a dude, and I really like to talk leadership, and that's really what we do, or one of the areas we do within my business at Top Dog Learning Group. And I'm sitting here in sunny Orlando, Florida.
Ah, beautiful. It's interesting you said it says a lot about you in three words. If you can tell us, as a leader, do you think leaders should ask their employees if they feel like they belong? Is that a question that they should ask them? Or if they have the emotional intelligence to be able to ask them, is that something that they should be asking their employees?
100%. Businesses should be asking all of their employees, do you feel a sense of belonging in the workplace? As we think about the diversity, equity, inclusion profession, it used to be about diversity, bringing the different folks into the room. And then inclusion, asking those folks to participate. But now the smart businesses are saying, let's flip that around. It's not so much what we're doing as a business, it's more about how do our employees feel? And so, yeah, asking, do you have that sense of belonging in the workplace? Do you feel that you can bring your authentic self? You feel safe and valued in the work that you do? Yeah, we should all be asking that, especially in such a tight labor market as we have around the world.
Right. Absolutely. And I think also when employees bring their authentic selves to work or even ask that, it already feels as though they are being included by asking such it's really a personal question. And do you think that allows organizations to have lower turnovers if people are more included?
Yeah, and there's data to back all this up. When I feel that I'm valued and seen with the authenticity that I bring to my job, I'm going to stick around. I'm actually going to do my performance is actually going to be better, studies show. And so, as a smart business, we should be asking the question, more importantly, listening to the responses, and then asking folks, well, what are we doing that we can think about? Well, how do we take those steps to make it that someone feels even more of that sense of belonging? Because we're never going to get it perfect. Of course not. So asking the questions and then doing something with the answers, I think, is the key.
Right. Exactly. What do you think they should strive at aside from asking those questions? I think that there's questions and there's also feedback. I
Mhm.
think what's really important is having a pulse or an assessment of what all employees are feeling in the workplace. And then based on that, what do you think now leaders should be striving at?
I think there's most organizations I work with, and we primarily work with large Fortune 500s, large not-for-profits, both in the U.S. and Canada as well as beyond. And most organizations we work with have some sort of employee engagement survey. And there's usually at least one question on there that says, I feel that I belong at XYZ company. But I think it's up to the leadership, the people leaders, to really get into that more frequently than that 1 year engagement survey kind of mentality. It should be part of the workplace culture, part of the team culture to say, how are you feeling today? How are you feeling with the work? Hey, I see that things are happening around us that might be hitting your specific demographic. How does that play out for you? How do you feel about that? And how is that impacting your work performance? So smart leaders need to be asking those questions because they're seeing a sliver of what people are experiencing in the workplace. They don't know what else is happening. And I just read a stat, and I knew this stat from a couple of years ago, and I'll steer it toward the LGBTQ+ community. And a couple of years ago, the statistic was that about 50% of queer folks in the US aren't out. So half of the gay workforce. And that was 2018 was the last Human Rights Campaign survey that did that. Flash forward to Gallup did a survey in 2020. So just a couple years later. So and their findings were, and I think they asked about like 1,300 employees or so, and their study found that about 40% weren't out. Still, that's regardless of which study you kind of look at, that's a lot of folks. And what's the reason why? They don't feel that they can belong. They don't feel safe. And we hear these terms of like psychological safety. People aren't out in the workplace because they don't feel safe. A lot of those folks will witness or hear disparaging remarks against the queer community or other underrepresented minorities. And so like, why do I put myself out on there? And if I know that it's going to be a hostile work experience, I'll just keep my head down and do subpar work, because studies show if I'm in that negative space in the workplace, I don't do as good a performance as someone who's in that sense of belonging. And so I think it's not just the right thing to do for leaders, but it also makes good business sense when you start adding the amount for turnover and replacement of folks. I think it costs about 3 to 6 months salary, according to a SHRM study I recently read. I think it's from 2017 actually, but I just read it. It's 3 to 9 months salary to replace someone who leaves at the job. So that's, if I'm a $60,000 employee, that's my annual salary. $30,000 to $45,000 it's going to take to get a person to sit at my desk or whatever that looks like. And that's recruitment costs, all the labor that goes into that, the interviewing costs, and all of those different things to train that person to get to that proficiency for the job that was just vacant. So it's smart business sense to keep folks. How do we do that? We create that sense of belonging for them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think also it will reduce the toxicity in the workplace.
Absolutely.
Right? It's paramount of how, of the environment that we're in. And I mean, it's not, if there's no inclusion, then like you said, you do subpar work, the person's going to be doing subpar work and always keeping their head down trying to do their work, but the turnover is also higher. And then there's all the other stuff, lunch breaks, you tend not to do those things. I never participated in anything. I was a teacher for 25 years and I literally, didn't feel included in the cafeteria. So I ate in my classroom. And when I ate in my classroom, I was still doing work. So I was more exhausted. And then I'd hear feedback from parents, who's this Black person, who's this Black teacher. And it was, there was just so much sadness and anger within me as an employee that I thought that I could do more and better, but I couldn't because I didn't have the mental capacity to do so, given the environment that I was in.
Yeah. I mean, it's not just taking a toll in the individual, but we're all connected in relationships, whether it's my BFF at work, my work spouse, or just the coworker who's sitting in the cubicle or the virtual space next to me. We're connected, and emotions are contagious, the good and the bad. And so if I'm feeling that negativity at work because, wow, I just heard a joke against the LGBT+ community, that's going to permeate that, whether it's tangible or not, that's going to permeate out beyond beyond just me, and just like you said, create that negative toxicity that we kind of want to avoid.
Absolutely. Absolutely. How do you think leaders can create that sense of belonging?
There's a couple different ways. And one of the things that I do in a lot of my signature talks and keynotes and things of that nature is I kind of break it up from a leadership perspective and I actually happen to have a slide, and that's kind of fun. But you can really think about it from 3 different strategic points. You can think in, speak up, and act out when it comes to creating a sense of belonging and being a consciously inclusive leader. So for think in, it's about you as a leader. You need to get your own house in order before you're going to create that space of inclusion for any of the others in your workspace. And so what does
Right.
that look like? Think about unconscious biases, and we've been hearing a lot of those in the last several years. We'll do things to find out which ones you could potentially have. There's assessments online, Project Implicit, but doing some mindful meditation things to kind of get out of your own head and see and hear what you're saying and doing. But you got to get your own stuff together first, at least start to. And that's kind of the think in perspective. With the speak up, any leader can, and actually the biggest example I use here is mitigating silent collusion within your workplace. So as a leader, and if you're not familiar with, I'm probably familiar with that term, but if you're not, silent collusion is, actually, I can tell a really fun story. Can I do that? It'd be fun. Okay.
You can absolutely tell all the stories you want.
Yay, stories. So, and this is an absolute true story. I was in Atlanta, and we were doing kind of like a closing little event off of a project. It was a change project with myself and one of my top doggers, which was what I call my consultants, and Lori. And so Lori and I are sitting there, and then there's 38 other folks in this conference room. They're all part of the client company team. And at the head of the table is the senior executive. And he literally is the one who signs the checks. And actually his gender is important to the story. So we're just about to start this. And basically it's like, yay, we're done the project kind of meeting. So everyone's in a good mood, having fun, chatting. And the voices die down. And you hear that senior executive say, well, you know how all women drive. And everyone just kind of stopped and looked, but no one said a word. And at that moment, every single one of us were engaging in silent collusion. We were silently supporting the, quite frankly, stupid statement that the senior executive said. And so when
what is it called?
Silent collusion. We were silently colluding or going with the individual who said that disparaging remark. And so when I talk about speak up, that's one of the biggest things that a leader can do is speak up on behalf of those who are being disparaged against. There's demeaning remarks. They're being excluded from the workplace, just like that executive said. And so, and we'll put it in the link in the notes and stuff. Like we created a really short little self-paced training on 6 ways to beat silent collusion using the term MOPSAM. And MOPSAM is an acronym for the 6 areas. And I use in a cheeky way, like a Hungarian pulley mop, like a little one of those dogs that looks like they have dreadlocks. They're really beautiful. And I name him Sam. And so if you remember his breed and his name, Mop Sam, it's cheeky, but it's a pneumatic kind of strategy. Right. But one of the best things to do for speak up as a leader is to just ask a question. And so to this individual executive, when he said, yo, women drive, someone, and I was about to, but Lori kicked me on the table and she said, wait, and I'm glad she did. And I'll tell you why in a moment. But if you ask a question like Bob, we'll pretend this executive's name is Bob, and no offense to any Bobs who are listening or watching, but we'll just use Bob. So Bob, what did you mean by that statement? And you just kind of let it sit. And so one of 2 things is going to happen. Bob was most likely operating out of his unconscious. So there's the think in, and it kicks the focus to the 40 bits of data that we as humans can focus on in our conscious minds. And so it's, oh no, I didn't mean that, in kind of bringing it to the forefront. And you just also want to be careful that you don't go, Bob, what did you mean by that statement? Because your tone, intonation sends a very different message that's going to put Bob's shields up, and you're not going to kind of get the point across that you'd like to with Bob. And so that's one of the 6 strategies. It's my personal favorite, but you just have to be mindful not to get caught up in those emotional pieces, especially if you're on the receiving end of the disparaging comment.
It's interesting. A lot of my podcasts are also on emotional intelligence, and I think yours is pretty refined.
A little bit.
How
Almost,
about
yeah,
that?
a little bit, a little bit. I actually, one of the chapters in my latest book, Pride Leadership, is all about empathetic leadership, and so I talk about Goldman and EQ, and I've since been chatting with him on LinkedIn, like kind of like a little fangirl that I am with him, and so, but I mean that is one of the 6 strategies. Or competencies that any leader has to have is being mindful of the emotions and how they impact you and the humans around you. So 100% get it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's interesting as a parent. I think I'm living it with my 8-year-old
Mm.
who's slowly getting out of the tantrum stage only because we've taught her words to her emotions because she would act out and we didn't know what was wrong, and then our EQ would go down as
Yeah.
parents because if you hear it long enough it goes down.
Yeah. 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 Totally.
Right. And then now it's okay, Sophia, why are you upset? And then, okay, but there's disappointment. And then now there's a word that now there's, mommy, I'm feeling really disappointed. And then,
Mm.
you see the energy in the body. And I said, well, that's good. At least now you can identify it because before she couldn't identify it. And as parents, I'm not sure because like you said, we were getting involved in the emotions and not
Mm.
stepping out of the emotion to be able to help her de-escalate her own emotion.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's
Right.
contagious. It's
And
contagious.
it is contagious. And I think also what happens with emotional intelligence is to be able to be self-aware at that point. So I always have to remind myself it's not about me. And it's not about me getting upset and saying, okay, Sophia, why are you crying? And it's okay, let's talk about this, but we'll wait until you finish crying or wait until you're finished being angry. And yes, those feelings are valid, but we can talk about it when we're in a better mood. You
Yeah.
see what I mean? So when you're
Exactly.
saying there's, you have to choose a time and a place and a tone, it changes the whole ball game.
Yes, exactly. And so just to kind of finish the 3 steps to create a more
Yep.
inclusive workplace. So act out is, empowering every leader. And by the way, when I say leader, those watching or listening, all y'all are leaders because leadership is about influence. It doesn't have to be about where you're at in the org chart.
Right.
So when we talk about acting out, it's being that advocate for creating inclusive work practices throughout your business or enterprise. So you sit in HR, what are your policies for trans healthcare or bereavement? I was working with a client and I am not a human parent in this particular lifetime, but I am a canine parent. And my canine kids are the world to me. They are my part of my family, as they are with many people, regardless if you have human kids or not. But one company I was working with said, we just revised our bereavement policy to include non-human family members. And I'm like, that is beautiful. And will it hit a lot of people? Maybe, maybe not. But for someone like me, I'm like, you see me, you appreciate me, and you honor the experience that I may have. Thank you. And that's the stuff that you can do and act out. It's just be mindful that how we go about doing the business may or may not be as inclusive as it could be. So can we do to change that? Let's put our pronouns in our emails. Why? Because to you, that may not matter, but to a member of the trans community or just a queer community in general, we love to see that. That means you're in tune, you're normalizing that concept, and you're empathetic to the plight of others. Beautiful. And what did that cost you? 5 minutes to change your email signature. Boom.
Absolutely.
So I think little things like that can go super far for the act out. So think in, speak up, act out to be a more inclusive leader.
Absolutely. And to give everybody a sense of belonging. And as the gay leader dude, can you explain what the rainbow, and I find this very interesting. And I thought actually what you just said, the pronouns would fall into the same category, but I don't think it does. But if you could tell, you just actually, let's go back.
Yep.
You said that how would you feel when you see others outside of the LGBTQ community put their pronouns in their description or bio or profile?
Or Zoom or whatever. The first word that pops into my head is safe,
Oh,
because I know that person has some sort of empathy that they took the bit of effort to put their pronouns in that signature. I still feel this way. I'm in my 50s. I've been around a while, and I
Right.
still feel vulnerable in a lot of situations. Now, hey, I'm the gay leadership dude. I have to own it and kind of put on that courageous face. But when
Right.
I see those pronouns in that Zoom name or in that email, I'm like, oh, it's a little safe harbor. Awesome. And that's vital to so many of us who want that psychological safety within the workplace. Just something simple can mean so much. And then I also then start to think, you know what, if they're putting their pronouns in there, hopefully they're open to all different other folks' experiences, not just the queer folks. And so it sends a message to me about their mentality and empathy when it comes to any other folks in the world.
Interesting. So you don't find it performative?
Not for the individual, but performative allyship can be macro and micro, quite honestly. I'll give the benefit of the doubt for that, but then if I start to see behavior or actions or hear words that are contrary to that email signature, then yes, I will see that is very performative. But until I get that data, I give the benefit of the doubt.
Of the doubt, of course. So, okay, that makes sense. So then the final question is really, as the gay leadership dude, can you explain what the rainbow corporate washing is and
Yes.
what leaders can do, to make people in the LGBTQ community feel like they belong?
So I love this question. I've had it a couple times, and I love this graphic. I take zero credit for it. And if you're watching, you're seeing it's an image of it's two images. On one side, it's the Lego came out with like little rainbow Legos pieces that they had, and they promoted it for Pride Month a couple years ago, and everyone was all excited because like, oh, look how inclusive Lego is. That's awesome. And no pun intended. If you've seen the first Lego movie, everything is awesome. But the next picture to the right of it is, and they're little Lego stormtroopers, and they're painting that rainbow gray. And that's what a lot of organizations do come July 1st. June, they're all about the rainbows, rainbow washing our logos. It's great. We celebrate Pride. We love queer employees and folks and customers, etc. June 1st comes along, and of course, their logo goes back to whatever corporate color it is. And while that may or may not be the case for a lot of organizations, it's a good symbol of what's called performative allyship, which is
Right.
the rainbow washing thing. We'll throw all the rainbows out in June, but July comes around, and then we're not being as inclusive to the queer community as we pretended to be last month. And so, what can companies do so that they're celebrating Pride 12 months a year? Yeah, give your rainbows, that's fine. But what are the health benefits again for all members of the queer community? Do you help assisting in adoptions? Because a lot of companies do. Are you creating space for an employee resource group that's not just, again, a tick box mentality, but you're listening to the feedback that the LGBTQ folks in that employee resource group are sharing? Are they sourced well, meaning not just throwing money at them, but are you giving them all the resources, including executive ears and eyes to the situation and perspectives that they hold? Those are things you don't just have to do in June. And so companies and organizations that do that, awesome. The one thing you're starting to see now, and a lot of folks are getting called out on it, is their silence when we need them. And I will be completely blunt, as you and I sit here in Florida, and there's a lot of negative things happening toward my community, both in the federal government or in the state government and local as well in some areas. And the silence for a lot of corporations who have a presence here in Florida and aren't saying anything against it is deafening. And that's exactly a symbol of performative allyship. Is, it's not an exaggeration to say literally lives are on the line. And there is a coordinated attack against the queer community federally and beyond. And by companies not stepping up and saying, yay, we love you in June, and not saying something now in March when laws are getting passed in my state that are knocking down the existence of my queer brothers and sisters and siblings, that's not the ally we need right now.
Absolutely. What do you want to see changed?
I want organizations to do like some have done in the past, like many did when the fight for marriage equality was happening, and that's step up and give those amicus briefs to whomever's there, stating the numbers. I mean, I hate to say it, a lot of it has to do with money. Yes, it's the right thing to do. Of course, those listening and watching, we embrace that. But for a lot of companies, it's smart business sense to be inclusive. Hands down, Google the business case for diversity and inclusion, and you will find all the data there. Where companies who are supposed to be good allies, they need to throw their money around. And you also saw this with a lot of the anti-trans bathroom bills that were around the country not too long ago, where companies said, you know what? Hey, we're pulling out of the state of Georgia because we have a big presence here. We spend lots of money making movies. And if you're not going to be cool, we're out of here. We'll find someplace else to do it. We need that kind of action now versus the, yay, it's June, here's a rainbow for you.
Right. Exactly. And what would you want the audience to take away from our conversation today?
Yeah, I think if you're not aware, especially if you're sitting here in the U.S., if you're not aware of the attacks that are happening against your queer, coworkers, family members, etc., open your eyes. The term woke has been stolen, and I want to steal it back. I mean, that is. I mean, your community is the one who created that gorgeously. So it's a good term. It's a great term. It's not a negative term. And if you want to be an ally to any of us other underrepresented folks, be aware of what's around you, what's happening, because it's only a matter of time until they start hitting other Well, it's a multi-front attack anyway. It's not just on queer folks, but be aware. And if you're not affected now, you will be. Mark my words. Absolutely. I'm not a fearmonger. I'm a positive kind of guy, but yeah, wake up, folks, if you're not awake and seeing some of the stuff happening.
Absolutely. I agree with it all. I love the feedback and what you shared with us, what you shared with us today. I think it's fascinating how I remember growing up, my parents always saying that, we need to, or they were telling my sisters and siblings and I that we need to assimilate. And then as I got older, I'm in my 50s as well. Yeah. So as I got older, I was like, what does assimilate really mean?
No, you're not.
Does assimilate right? Does assimilate mean? I thought growing up it meant to integrate. So I did have friends from different communities, different backgrounds, different religious backgrounds. I still do, because I thought that's what it meant.
Yeah.
And then as I got older, I realized, wait a second, who's assimilating to what?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Do I have to change my hair? Do I have to dress a certain way? Do I have to speak a certain way? What does assimilate really mean? And can I still bring my authentic self as I assimilate?
Yeah, right? It's so right? True. That's so true.
Isn't that true?
Yep.
But it's a fascinating conversation that we can probably do a part 2 to.
Exactly. Yeah. And I that's actually one of the other chapters in Pride Leadership is talking about authenticity. And so where's that line? And these are the 6 competencies that I highlight in Pride Leadership: authenticity, courage, empathy, communication, relationships, and culture. And yes, branding with the rainbow flag, of course it is. But when these are the 6 that in my 30-ish years of just working with any leader, these are the ones that make someone succeed or not. And so when you talk about authenticity, we have the conversation about, well, should I wear the corporate suit like all the other senior executives because that's what they do, or do I not? And what does that look like? And where do I adjust those dials so that I'm becoming part of the culture, but I'm also not jeopardizing my own authentic self? And there's no easy answer. It's very personal, but it's something to think through. And I love having those conversations. Yeah.
Absolutely. Me too. Thank you so much. As we reach the top of the Diversity Connects Us hour, I want to thank everybody and all of you for listening. This podcast highlights lived and inspirational stories of strength and tenacity. We share profound and courageous dialogues that influence DEI and emotional intelligence by breaking the barriers and labels of stereotypes, offering best practices to achieve a more significant and cultural mindset. Stay tuned as we continue to share our voices in the DEI space. To trend with us, hashtag diversity connects us. Steve, it's been such a pleasure speaking
Thank
with
you.
you.
Well,
I
this is
really enjoyed you coming here today and saying yes.
I'm so happy to have been here. Thank you so much for creating this space as well.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you.